Hi everyone, it's Jeanette here from the Sewing Studio and welcome. Now today I thought I would share something I was going to do not being filmed, and I thought, Jeanette, what are you doing? You need to share this with people, and that's scrappy binding. Now I've been working on the Dresden Snowflake and I was getting it finished, and in the last video we did a little bit of free motion quilting, which was a viewer request that says, can you show us some free motion but without any stitch regulators on your machine? So we did that. So I went home and I finished off the free motion quilting on it, and I was about to put the binding on, and I thought, no, actually, I don't think I've shared scrappy binding with you before, so let's do it. So I've halted my eagerness to get it done until we could film this. So that's what I'm going to show you today. Now, it's a fairly simple technique, so if you're new to this, this is a nice easy one to begin with. So let's just crack on, shall we? Right, so my little table topper here I've done. The first thing we need to do is work out what the measurement for the circumference is. And this one was 18.5 by 15.5. I made a little note here because my memory's shocking nowadays. So adding all those together, that gives me, I need at least 68 inches of binding. We need to allow a little bit extra for our mitered corners when we come to put it on. But for the moment, I'm just going to work with the actual measurements of the piece that I'm doing, which is 68. And then for the scrappy binding, I've got my different fabrics here, which came from the same fabrics that I've used in the centre. And I had 10 of them. So we just did some simple maths. Now I'm going to write this down. And I thought I probably should have typed this all out neatly, but this is how I do it. I normally have like a little notepad or something near me when I'm sewing. So I've got my 68 inches and I need to divide that by how many fabrics I've got, which is 10. So that's going to equal 6.8. So I'm going to round that up to 7 inches, and then we need to add ½ inch for seam allowance because we're going to join all of these pieces with 1/4 inch seams. So I need to add ½ inch to that. So my actual total is going to be 7.5 inches. So all of my fabrics, apart from the first and the last one, I cut to 7.5 inches. And that will all become clear why I leave the beginning and the end one slightly longer, because that will basically take up any slack, because we're not working with the precise, because it's actually 6.8. So we are going to end up with a little bit of an anomaly at the beginning and at the end. Now, sometimes it works out absolutely perfectly, and in which case you can just trim all your pieces to that size and it will work. So what I've done is that black one is going to be my sarta strip. So I'm just going to lay them all out here so you can see my order. Now, you'll notice this one was slightly smaller than 7.5 inches, but that's okay because one, the end strips will make up any difference, but also if you've got a slightly longer one in some of the others, you could add a ½ inch here or ½ inch there to some of the others. So it's completely flexible if your fabrics don't all measure 7.5 inches. Now, if they do, it sort of works out perfectly. Well, perfectly-ish. I use the word perfect, but we don't actually do perfect. So this is going to be my order, and you can see I've trimmed all of these to size. And then we've got, that's going to be my end one. So that's going to be my order. So the first thing we're going to do is take that to the sewing machine, and we're just going to join all of these pieces along the short edges with 1/4 inch seams. So really nice and simple. So I've just got my first two pieces here, and as I said, I'm going to do a 1/4 inch seam. So I've got my 1/4 inch foot on and my 1/4 inch stitch, and I've just started on my little piece just because that's habit, and we're just going to sew. And I'm just going to chain piece this through, and for any newer sewers, that just means you just feed in one after the other. So I'm doing these in sets of 2. I really like the scrappy binding because it's a good way of using up all your bits. Now I'm going to keep those together in 2s so that I know those two go together. So I'm just going to lay them down there out the way for the minute. And these two go together. And I've left that one under the needle so I didn't have to break the thread there. And these were my other two. That one goes on the end. And I've just found the end of the other one without having to clip the thread, because then I can just attach this one here and just carry on sewing. So that's our binding made, so let's take it to the iron. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is actually press these seams open, because we want to reduce the bulk. So that is the downfall of this particular method. So I'm just going to go through and just open up all these seams and iron them flat. So that will just take a minute. So now they're all pressed open, I'm just going to press this in half, and so we're just going to bring the raw edge down to the raw edge. And when we come to these points, I'm just going to make sure that I sort of lie them on top of each other as best I can. And there we are, that's all done. So the next bit I'm going to do, and I always do this where you've got a straight seam here to join, because we don't want that on a corner, because that's going to end up giving us a really funky looking corner, and we don't want funky corners. Well, we might, but not on this. So I'm just going to sort of choose where I'm going to start, and I normally start somewhere along the bottom, but with this one it really doesn't matter, because you can't see where you start and stop. Because we've got lots of seams there. But if I start somewhere about here and just make sure that that first one, let me just put that under the close-up, that first join isn't on a corner. So if I do that, let's start there. Now these are the flathead flower pins. They're a bit stronger than the little thin glass head pins, so I'm less likely to bend these. Now when it comes to doing, I'm going to do this under the close-up, we'll do it again on the machine, but when it comes to do our corner, and I fit this like I'm going to sew it, but we don't keep the pins in, we go straight up, and then we want everything here to be in a straight line, and this bit here should be on a 45-degree angle, and then we bring our binding down. And now we've got 3 match points. The fold of that fabric at the top should match the raw edge there. The raw edge should match the raw edge of the topper. And then you have these 2 little folds here which should sit nice and neatly on top of each other. And if we've got all those 3 match points correct, we'll have a nice mitered corner. Now I'll show you that again when we come to do the next bit. So here, now I'm quite close, but I think when I do my fold, I should be okay. So let's just, so this is literally a dry run of how it's going to go round, but we might need to adjust. But I find it's better to take the time and do this now. Sorry, I was going to do that under the camera again. So I've taken that straight up so that all of that is in a straight line. We should have a 45-degree angle there. Then we bring our binding strip down. And then we've got our 3 match points. So raw edge, folded edge against raw edge, and then our 2 folded edges of our binding should all be on top of each other. Now that should just be okay. It's a little bit bulky there, but the 1/4 inch seam is down here, so that should be okay. But like I say, if we had that hitting right in that corner, that's not going to give us a nice mitered edge when we come to fold around the binding. So just checking. So far it's looking quite good. Oh, don't know why I did it like that. Ooh, we've just got that there. So let's just check. If I move everything down a couple of inches, that will push everything the right way and give us a bit there. So I'm actually going to do that. Let's just bring that down to about there, not too far. And this is why we do this, so because that would have given me a problem there. So let me just quickly put that round again just to make sure I've got that right and I haven't moved a different seam onto a corner. Like I say, it doesn't take, a small thing like this doesn't take too long, but it is worth checking. I think I've said that. I'd rather spend the time now than get it sewn down, realise I've got a problem and then have to rip things out later anyway. It's looking like we should be okay. I remember the first time I made a quilt, I pinned it all and took it to the machine and then realised actually it was quite hard to sew with it all pinned, so then I had to take all the pins out. Right, so that one's okay. And you can see there we've got plenty of overlap. So I'm now going to take that to the machine. I'm going to take these pins out again because I actually find it easier to sew binding down without any pins in. Put one pin there. And I'm actually going to start, I'm going to leave myself a pretty long tail here. So I'm actually probably going to start somewhere about here and hit that corner. Now the other thing I do just need to grab is a little ruler. I'm going to sew this down with I might do a 3/8 inch seam actually. So let's take it to the machine. I've taken it off my 1/4 inch and I'm just putting it on a straight stitch because this is a computerised, and even on some of the manual machines you'll find that if you alter the stitch width it will just move your needle. So the stitch width is the one that's got like a little zigzag on it. Not all machines do it. I know some machines, if you alter the zigzag, it actually thinks you want to do a zigzag stitch. I have come across that before. But generally speaking, we can sort of nudge our needle to where it needs to be. So I'm actually giving myself a 3/8 inch seam, just because I'll see a little bit more binding on the front, and because this was a 2.5 inch wide strip, I should have said that at the beginning, I've got plenty of fabric to work with. So I'm actually going to start about there. Now I just drop the needle, making sure that where I've put the needle I'm not going to hit, because I've still got the 1/4 inch foot on. Some 1/4 inch feet have only got a hole in the centre. So if yours has got a hole in the centre, you might need to change your foot out or use a 1/4 inch seam. So we're just going to sew, and we're going to stop 3/8 of an inch away from this edge. Now, if you were doing a 1/4 inch seam, you would stop a 1/4 inch away. So the rule of thumb is however thick your seam is, or wide, that's the distance you need to stop before you hit this edge here. So I'm just going to do a couple of stitches. And before I get too far, I'm going to mark my 3/8 now. I think that's a 1/4 inch mark on my foot, but I don't think I've got 3/8, so I'm going to manually mark this. I'm just laying the 3/8 of an inch, 1, 2, 3, there. And I'm just going to draw myself a little line there, because that's where I need to stop. Now I'm just going to, do one more stitch. And some people sew off the corner. I used to, now I just back stitch. And then we're going to cut the thread. And we're going to do our mitered seam again, but for real this time, because we're going to sew it down. So we're going to go up, fold it back down, checking for our 3 match points. Ooh. Grab a pin, I've put them miles away from myself. And then we can carry on. Now I tend to start a little bit in, do a couple of stitches back, and carry on from there. I'm going to take that pin out again and use it again on the next corner. Now once again, I'm going to mark my 3/8, which is there. And I wait until I get fairly close, because you'll find that the machine will sort of push the fabric along a little bit. So if you marked it when you first turn the corner, by the time you get here, you'll probably find it's no longer still at your 3/8. And wait till I hit that line. Reverse back. Cut my thread and do my next mitre. So I'm just going to carry on until this is stitched all the way around, and then I'll show you what we do to finish off the ends. So I'm doing the last corner and I'm just going to come down probably to about here and stop. Okay, so we've gone all the way around and we've now come to this bit, which is our finishing bit. Now that's a shame, look, we haven't quite got enough there because we need a 1/2 inch overlap to allow for the 2 seam allowances. So what I'm actually going to need to do is cut this one. So we're going to have a small piece here and a slightly, so I'm probably going to go somewhere around here, and if I need to unpick a couple of stitches there I can, and this is why I leave myself enough room to work here so that we've got enough. We could nearly have not done with this last strip, but that's fine. So I'm going to cut this one, I'm going to cut this bottom one about there. Now you could do it with a ruler, I'm just going to scissor cut. Sorry, little dear, I've just cut his hind legs off. And then this one. And we need to overlap, actually. That's not very straight, Jeanette. I should have used a rotary cutter, perhaps, after all. Note to self, I can't cut straight with scissors. There we are, that's better. And then this tail now needs to overlap by 1/2 inch. So I'm just going to put that on there, put that on there. I do it that way because I'm right-handed. And I'm just measuring, I'm going to show you under the close-up actually, what I'm measuring. So there's my end of that piece there. I've got my other tail there, and I'm just measuring from that there to 1/2 inch past that. So my line is right on that edge of that, and we're going to mark. Oh, that didn't mark very well. Red on black. I think I can see that. And then we're going to cut that off. Now I tend to just come inside that line just a fraction, because you tend to find, sorry, excuse me, there's always like a little bit of extra fabric when you do this. So literally, probably about 1/16, that's all I've come in by. So that's that end bit. And now we can take these 2 pieces back to the sewing machine. And we're just going to sew these 2 bits together with a 1/4 inch seam, and that will take up that 1/2 inch that we've overlapped by. Now I think I'm just going to unpick a couple of the stitches here, just to give myself a little bit more room to work. Yeah, that should be better. But as I said, it's a really nice, simple one in terms of the measurements, joining them. You know, we're used to working with 1/4 inch seam allowances, and you know, there's no complicated bit to do at the end. We're just trying to keep these fabrics as flat as we can. Now we didn't need to worry about reversing, because in a minute we're going to do a stitch which comes straight across that. Now at this point I tend to just finger press this final seam open, but you could take that to the iron and do that. And then now that piece of binding should fit that gap, so we can just go back to our other settings. And I'm just going to start, I'm just going to check I've got my needle in the right place. Yeah. I'm just going to start a little way back from where we finished, so we're going to be going over those previous stitches that we did, and we're going to keep going until we overlap the stitches at the beginning there. So there we go, that's the binding all on. Now if I just flip this over onto the backs, just so that you can see and put it under the close-up, you will see that because we used a 2.5 inch, We've got plenty of fabric there to cover those stitches. Now, I should have said, I always sort of stitch onto the front and then hand slip stitch that into place. And what I do when I have a scrappy binding like this is I will change the colour of the thread depending on the sort of the piece of fabric I'm putting down, unless it's one that sort of blends in with all of them. So that's my bit of homework now, but that is done. That's going to look really nice, and you can see there, even though we've got a shorter piece there, it really isn't going to look out of place on the scrappy binding. So that's a really nice way and a really simple way just to join pieces of fabric with a straight seam. Nice simple maths in terms of sort of how much we need to leave at the end, not too complicated to finish, but a really nice look. And the other thing I will just say about this binding as well is, you know, sometimes you like to see the blocks of colour rather than when we put a mitered seam in and you get sort of things blending into each other. So you definitely get those sort of segregations of all the different colours on that. So I think that's really going to be nice on the outside and help sort of draw the two edges together, the binding and the centre of the quilt. So there's a little bit more homework for me. Always things for me to sew, isn't there? Always things for me to do, which I like. So thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed my very simple straight seam scrappy binding. That was a mouthful, wasn't it? Thank you for watching. If you do like this, please like, comment, share, subscribe, all those wonderful things. And of course, send in your photos of anything you're making if you used any of these pieces as inspiration, even if you've just used the scrappy binding but on something else. It's always a thrill to see what you're doing out there. So thank you ever so much for watching, and thank you for your time, and I hope you'll join me again here next time in the sewing studio.